Hey guys, what's up? My name's Chopper, and welcome everybody to today's video. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be going over the top 15 best guns in PUBG right now. And since a brand new balancing patch has come out, it's been a while since you had one of these in PUBG, and it's really switched some things up. So what you're going to want to know is all of the weapons that you should be running and what you should not be running, and we're going to be going over all of that today. Now, before we get started today, if you guys end up enjoying the video, then I would really appreciate if you could spare 1 second to drop a like rating. It is absolutely free to you, and it helps me out a ton. Also, if you're new around here and you haven't already done so, make sure you follow the Twitch. But anyways, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Coming today at our number 15 spot, guys, is going to be the G36C. Now, this also is going to cover, to some degree, the QBZ and also the SHARE. It's basically the slower firing 5.56 ARs. Now, all three of these weapons are still going to be incredibly consistent. So if you like these weapons, then they're still going to perform very well. However, after the 5.56 AR nerf, they aren't going to be quite as hard hitting as they used to be. Because the nerf was a damage per bullet nerf, what this means for something like specifically the SHARE, because it's slower firing, it's going to have a theoretically much higher time to kill. I've been playing with the SCAR, the QBZ, and these weapons recently, and I have noticed that even this very slight nerf to these weapons does make a pretty big difference when it comes to time to kill, so they are still absolutely viable, and I would say still even very good in this game, and that's why they're coming at the number 15 spot, but maybe they aren't as high or as competitive as they used to be, and the meta's changed a little bit. Alright, moving on, and coming in at number 14 is a weird one. I didn't think I'd ever be saying this, but I'm going to give it to the Tommy gun. The Tommy gun is genuinely pretty good now. Now, with the most recent balancing patch, what they did to the SMGs was extend the effective range, which it desperately needed, but not only that, the important part here is that they increase the damage that SMGs now do to limbs. This right here is the key thing to know, because in some theoretical situations, now SMGs will kill faster than like most assault rifles on the body. What's weird is that now if you're going against a fully armored player, like all level 3'd out, you're going to be able to kill them quicker by shooting them in the limbs with an SMG than if you shot them in the chest with an AR, which it gets sort of weird with balancing and time to kills, but that's how it works out now. But that being said, this is for very specific situations, and I still recommend ARs just generally over SMGs. Like, even after this balancing patch, I still don't think they're super viable across everything, but they are significantly better now, and for these situations, if you just need to like shred armor, then the SMGs are for you. Coming in today at the number 13 spot, it's a gun that's really growing on me recently. This is the SLR, and so DMRs ever since this patch have been more important than ever, and I think that this is definitely one of the shining stars of the bunch. Despite this being one of the harder guns to use in my opinion, I really think if you practice enough and you can find your handles with this weapon, it's always worth having this as a secondary. You don't need quite as much to fully attach it like you do in SKS. It's also got a little bit more damage and shoots just ever so slightly faster than the SKS when it comes to bullet speed. And I don't know about you guys, but this is slowly but surely becoming one of my favorite DMRs in the game. As long as you can find your handles with this thing, I feel like, then it's going to be something that you really tend to favor. It's still an option just to put scopes on assault rifles and use them kind of like DMRs, but since their recent nerf, then it's not quite as viable anymore, and that's why DMRs are so important nowadays. If you end up in that situation where you can't find a DMR and all you have is a scope and another, single tap AR, then the best one to have that is coming in at our number 12 spot. This is the MK47 Mutant, and it's the weapon that really went from being one of the worst guns in the game to really finding its place in this meta. With the balance patch, all of the basically automatic assault rifles got nerfed. So this even includes the 7.62 ones, the AKM and the barrel, that sort of stuff, but the MK47 Mutant did not catch one. And what this means now is that it still retains its higher damage, but it's basically specialized as this single tapping weapon. It's not quite as good up close as something like a barrel is, and it's going to beat that every single time, but at a distance, you're going to have higher damage if you're going to be single tapping with the Mutant. This is pretty much your only option for single tapping a weapon that isn't a DMR when it comes to 7.62. Like, I never recommended doing that with the AK or the barrel anyways, just because, the bullets were pretty slow coming out of those, and they're just not designed for that to begin with. But now if your preferred play style is to have these single tap DMRs, then the MK47 Mutant is a huge candidate for this, and it's really kind of found its own place to stay in this game, which is good. But moving on, guys, coming in at number 11 is going to be the brand new Uzi Pro. So now the micro Uzi can now take a red dot, it can take a holographic sight, and overall it's just been improved greatly. Going back to what we said about SMGs earlier, this is the reason why it's become so effective now, because the range is better, the limb damage has greatly improved, and that really makes all the difference in the world when it comes to the Uzi Pro. As it turns out, it's pretty viable to run a DMR and also something like a micro Uzi if you really want to. You can have these for your up close and sort of medium range engagements, and anybody with any sort of level 3 armor is going to be absolutely destroyed by an SMG. The Uzi, even before this balance patch, has always been really solid up close, but now it just got even better, so you really love to see it. Of course, it's not going to be as flexible as a lot of the assault rifles, but it's still very specialized in my opinion. But moving on, and coming at the number 10 spot is an absolutely classic weapon, the M416. Now, I'm pretty sure the last time I rated guns like this was was just after the other balance patch came out, and it was like over half a year ago, so it's been a while, and I rated the M416 as like either the best or one of the best guns in the game, and while it's still a very, very solid weapon, it's not quite the highest tier in my opinion anymore. Now, especially when it comes to armored players, the M416 is going to struggle a little bit when it comes to time to kill. It's no longer just this like absolute laser melt machine like it used to be. The single tap on this weapon is no longer quite as strong as something like the M16 is, and so the little bit of a damage drop off is kind of rough. But all of that being said, this is important to keep in mind. The weapon is still probably the most flexible gun in the game. That hasn't changed at all. The biggest thing that has been adjusted is the time to kill on this is now just slightly higher, so you need to land maybe 1 to 2 more shots, you know, generally per gunfight to win it. Getting away from that and coming in at the number 9 spot is a weapon that falls into basically the same category as the M4, and this is the barrel. So this is pretty much the equivalent of the M4, just the 7.62 version, and you guys know it's an absolutely fantastic weapon. Certainly one of my favorite in the game, but it has also caught a little bit of a nerf just like the M4. What I loved about this weapon was its versatility and also just its raw time to kill. It was very close to something like the Groza, which was unbelievable, but it was also something you could just pick up off the ground. Now, since its damage is a little bit lower, it doesn't quite hit like it used to, but it's still an unbelievably good weapon. So by no means am I writing this off in my book as being something I'm going to use, because the barrel is still fantastic. However, it might not be how you remember if you haven't played in a while. The equation for this balance patch to determine whether a gun got hit really hard or not, and it's a lot worse now, is basically the slower the fire rate of that weapon, the harder it got hit. So something like the AKM is now significantly worse than it used to be, just because the rate of fire is very low. Despite the nerf, the barrel can get away with it, I think, just because of its raw fire rate, which is insane. Alright guys, now coming in at the number 8 spot is the M24 sniper rifle. So this is kind of a weird one. Now, the M24 and the Carnady 8 have switched damage profiles since the last patch. So what this means is that the Carnady 8 now has more damage than the M24. What's interesting about this though is that this doesn't really change too much. Now, I still prefer the Carnady 8, and I'll tell you why a little bit later, but the M24 is still, it's got faster bullets, so if bullets are fired at the same time, the M24 is still going to win, as most players shoot for headshots nowadays. You could argue that the M24 is also easier to use because of that faster bullet speed, and you know, some people just prefer it to the K9, and I'll tell you why. Like, I prefer one over the other, but the damage switch doesn't really seem to change that much in this patch, and you can still run either or. You just have to determine whether you want higher damage but slower bullets, or faster bullets and lower damage. But when it comes to headshots, it doesn't matter at all, and the M24 in fact has an advantage. This weapon has literally went from being an outstanding crate gun and being like literally the second most powerful weapon in the game to now being weaker than a Carnady 8. Pretty crazy, but it's still a super great weapon. Moving on here and coming in at number 7, I'm going to give this to the M16. Now, overall, I still am going to say that by and large, the M4 is still a better weapon when it comes to most cases, but the M16, I wanted to make sure that it gets its time in the spotlight now. Similar to the MK47 Mutant, the M16 did not end up getting a damage nerf, meaning that the single tap and the damage per bullet on the M16 is now higher than all of the other automatic ones. In comparison, it is absolutely great for single tapping now with this weapon, and it's pretty viable with burst fire nowadays, especially when you have the right attachment. So it kind of feels like the M16 of the really early days of PUBG to some degree. As I said though, me personally, I still think the M4 is going to be overall a better weapon, but now the M16 is probably not going to get passed over as much, and I've definitely been using it significantly more than I have in the past, and it's just good to have a little bit more variety and a reason to use weapons over the others. So this is a really good change in my opinion, and the M16 is great. Coming in at number 6, guys, is going to be the Groza, an absolute fan favorite among a lot of you, and for good reason. It's an insane weapon, and despite the recent damage nerf, it's still unbelievably powerful. So this really didn't seem to get hit too hard in my opinion. The fire rate's good enough where the time to kill isn't going to make that much of a difference. The time to kill may end up working out where it's exactly the same as it used to be, but if it's not, it's probably going to end up where you need to land maybe one more shot, but ultimately it's going to perform basically the same. A side note about the Groza, I think what this balance patch did is bring the gap between the barrel and the Groza even closer, so now that these weapons are, you know, very viable and they're very comparable to one another as well, the barrel might be just as effective as using the Groza, the only difference being recoil control. Either way, whatever your preference is, both of these weapons are on this list, so they're absolutely fantastic at the end of the day. Coming in at the number 5 spot is one I think you guys are going to be really happy about. This is the Vector, and this has significantly caught a huge buff since the last patch, and what this means for this weapon is that this is the go-to SMG for fighting armored players. Now, weird fact about this gun specifically and all the other SMGs to some degree is that fighting a fully level 3 armored player, you're going to kill them quicker by shooting them in the legs than you will shooting them in the chest. Again, that goes back to those weird limb damage multipliers, which I'm not really still sure how that's going to affect the game long term. I guess we'll have to wait and see with SMGs. But at the very least, what we can pull from that right now is that vectors are absolutely crucial in having, especially if you're going to be fighting very armored players, and maybe you don't have a super high time to kill weapon. The DPS has always been insane on the vector, and fighting armored players with this insane DPS, with this damage multiplier, means that it's an extremely good weapon, even with its buffed effective range. Like, the vector is unbelievably good now. What I will say though, take this in caution, is that you still need to have your vector, at least try to have it fully kitted out, at least have the extended mag on it. That hasn't really changed at all. Now keep in mind, it's certainly not a replacement for anything long range, so as long as you know that, you should be good to go. But moving on, and coming in at the number 4 spot is another crate weapon, the M249. And despite all of the changes that have been made in the recent balance patch, I think this gun now is more important than ever to have. Something I kind of just thought of is this, right? Since basically all of the guns that people were using got nerfed a little bit when it comes to their damage, meaning you now have to land more shots, what's nice about this patch is the fact that now, because everybody's just so much better at shooting than they used to be considered to the average player about a year ago, then now what this means is that you need to land more shots, keeping the skill gap very high, keeping the game entertaining. And the M249 is now really representative of that, right? Because everybody is going to be landing as many shots as possible, and you have 100 to use in the M249. And now I really feel like it's found its place in this game, being like not just a 5.56 weapon that has a lot of ammo. It's like really its own entity now, which is great. And so it's unbelievably good, and I really think that you should try to chase this in drops as much as possible. Alright guys, beginning into our top 3 today, some of the best weapons in the entire game. Coming at the number 3 spot is going back over to the Kar 98. So I was going to tell you a little bit earlier why I prefer this weapon to the M24. Now, despite, like I said earlier, the M24 having a little bit faster bullet speed, it not really mattering between these two when it comes to headshots, I still think the Kar 98 is better just overall because it's very theoretical that you're only going to land headshots. The Kar 98 is going to hit a bit harder for body shots and something that maybe is a little bit off. Also, it's worth mentioning that me personally, I think a lot of other players just have more practice with the Kar 98 and kind of like have a better feel for the gun, which is really important. And even if that's not exactly a statistical measurable thing, it's still something that's a very important factor when it comes to determining how effective a gun is. So for me, I have a better feel with the Kar 98. It does a little bit more damage, and even the bullet speed can be negligible in some gunfights, and so I really think that you can never go wrong with this weapon. But the best part about this update for this weapon is now that there is reason to run one or the other. It's not just the M24 is all around better, right? There's the advantage and a disadvantage to both, which is fantastic. But getting away from that and coming in at the number 2 spot is still going to be the best sniper rifle in the game. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the Kar 98 is still the best combat sniper, but the AWM is going to be better as a crate weapon, and just in comparison is miles above. I feel like you guys don't really need me to tell you how good the AWM is. If you're a PUBG player that has any more than an hour and 6 minutes on the game, then you already know the AWM is probably the most powerful gun in the entire game. But I think it's even more valuable now because of all these changes that have been made, and it's especially going to be important to run with something like an SMG might be a good setup. But either way, you all know the AWM is absolutely incredible, and I have zero complaints when it comes to this weapon. But finally, ladies and gentlemen, coming in at the number 1 spot of the best gun in PUBG right now is going to be the Mark 14. And so because of this patch, this gun has grown even more powerful. And even in the last rating, I really feel like this was probably even so the best gun in the game. Nothing has changed, but it got even better. Because this is now basically an assault rifle that didn't get nerfed, and it's also a DMR that also didn't get nerfed. It's super versatile and very easy to use, and it's only gotten better as time has went on. If you ask me, this is the most sought after and most valuable weapon in not only crates, but in the entire game in general. And I don't think anything is going to dethrone this as the best gun in the game unless something major happens. If something new gets added that's just absolutely wild, the Mark 14 might stay king for the foreseeable future. It's just so hard for anything to compete against this gun. It's so hard for you to play against somebody who's using it, who has a pretty decent shot, and it's very effective if you're running it. So my mind will not be changed. The Mark 14 is still the best gun in the entire game of PUBG. So that is going to be the video for today, guys, of the top 15 best guns in the current patch. I really hope you guys did enjoy this, and I hope this was able to help you out. If it did, make sure you drop a like on the video, subscribe if you are brand new, of course, and also, like I said at the beginning of the video, make sure you go ahead and follow me over on Twitch, as soon as I'm back from my trip, that's where we're going to be streaming every single day, and I'd love to have you guys over there for the stream. It's going to be an absolutely great time, and I can't wait to see you all there. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching today. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you all on the next live stream or the next video. Take it easy, and peace out.